There's this undercurrent of fear that if I try to be my true self, that there is a risk of rejection, of abandonment, ridicule, disapproval, disappointment, because that is something that I experienced as a very, very young girl.
Welcome to Who Cares About My Story, the podcast on how sharing your personal brand story can impact your business. We will explore the perks and also the behind-the-scenes challenges of figuring out what to share. I'm your host, Reme Mancera, a personal brand strategist who loves finding the story connectors that illustrate the benefits of what you offer. And by the way, you don't need a Hollywood style for that. In case you ever wonder, remember, your story is relevant and worth telling. Hey there! I can't wait for you to listen to today's episode. Our guest is Kim Gross, a life coach and motivational speaker who hosts the podcast Masks Off for people pleasers and perfectionists. Kim helps people find out exactly who they are behind their mask and teaches them how to undo patterns, stop living for others, and create the life they desire. In this episode, Kim shares her personal journey to be true to herself. She talks about the power of vulnerability and how taking off your mask can lead to deep connection and transformation. She explains the importance of doing inner work and how that healing process has helped her and her business. From fear to rejection to opening up in her upcoming book, Kim's path is so inspiring. I'm curious to know which of her stories resonate with you the most. Now, let's get started. Welcome, Kim. I am delighted to have you here as a guest on the Who Cares About My Story podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Remy.
So I am looking forward to this conversation. So let's start. Could you please tell us who you are and what you do?
So I am Kim Gross, and I'm the host of the podcast Masks Off for people pleasers and perfectionists. And I am a soon-to-be author. I am a former school teacher, and I also am a mom of a 24 and 21-year-old. And I am a person who has done a lot of inner work on myself over the last several decades that have gotten me to this point of freedom, of peace and liberation, where I can then help other people through teaching, through my podcast, how to go from a place of victimhood, or which I like to call the people pleasing and perfectionistic prison, to paradise, which is the freedom. And when I talk about prison, it's prison of the mind. It's prison to patterns that we have been playing out most of our lives. And that's another thing that I say all the time as a recovering people pleaser and perfectionist and or codependent, that we often live out patterns rather than living a life. And that's what I help people to do with my purpose work, is to help them start to live a life that they desire, that they create, that they're happy about, that they're fulfilled with, rather than living on this hamster wheel of waking up every day and like, another freaking day.
Yeah. So you tackle a bit on this, but can you tell us a bit more about your story? How did you get here?
I will definitely share my story, but first of all, I have to ask if this is okay. I forgot to ask in the beginning. Are you allowed to swear on your podcast? Because if not, I have to censor myself because I swear a lot.
You are free to say whatever.
Okay. If it comes out, I mean, and I only swear if it's natural. I don't swear on purpose, so I won't do a lot. So, well, and you know a little bit about my story because I worked with you in terms of helping me with my story brand. And my story is how I got to this place of doing this purpose work. I didn't know it at the time that I was going through all the pain and all the crap. But now that I'm on the other side of it and I can look back, I'm like, oh, of course I had to go through all that pain to get to where I am now to be able to help other people. So my story really started, and I know I shared this with you before, is that before the age of 10, I knew exactly what it felt like at times to be my true self. I can remember playing in the snow and just making snow angels or climbing snowbanks, jumping in the leaves, riding my bike down the street, no handed, just the wind like going through my hair and feeling completely free and comfortable in my skin. I knew that I was connected to nature and connected to source. Now, of course, at the time, I didn't know that, right? I didn't have words for that. I was only a little girl, but that's what I felt. I was at home in my skin and being my true self. And then two pivotal things happened to me, two defining moments. One was with my fifth grade teacher who at a parent teacher conference with my mom. And again, I know I shared this with you before. I don't know why I was at the conference, but I was for some reason. I can even remember one of my classmates sitting on the other side of the room, and I was over here with my mom and the teacher. And my teacher said to my mom, Kim is a pleasure to have in class. She doesn't disrupt class. She's a good girl. She's a pleasure. However, she is not working to her potential. And I didn't know it back then, but I know now that when you tell a child that he or she is not working to their potential, it can be interpreted as you're not enough. Who you are is not enough, and what you're doing is not enough. And that is exactly how I interpreted that. And that was my very, like, I don't know if it was my first, but it was one of those defining moment situations where I was like, who I am and what I'm doing is not good enough. So I want my teacher to be happy with me. I want him to approve. I want his approval. So naturally, I just started pleasing him, wanting to please him. So I worked harder. And as I worked harder, my grades improved. And then I started getting the validation on all the papers. A plus, great job. So proud of you. You're doing great. Keep going. And each time I got back a math quiz or a spelling test with those comments on there and those A pluses, it just sent off like an endorphin hit. I just craved and wanted more and more of that external validation because it felt so good. And then I would go home with my report card or my progress report, and my mom was all of a sudden happy. And my aunt was giving me $5 for every freaking A. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. But the problem was it was all out there. It was all on the outside. It was external. It wasn't coming from within. And that just sent me on a trajectory of perfecting, performing, and pleasing. And then it just doubled down when I turned 11-ish, 11, 12, middle school, and I hit puberty. Now, all of us go through puberty. One might think, why, Kim, are you making such a big deal about going through puberty? Why was that so hard for you? And the reason why it was so hard is because number one, I was one of the first out of my peers to go through. And it seemed like it happened overnight. One day I was just like no boobs, skinny as a board and just normal. I was comfortable in my body prior to puberty. And then I wake up, it felt like overnight, I had these big boobs. I had a big butt, my thighs. I have stretch marks still because my body just changed and stretched. So I shot up several inches and I had acne everywhere. I would just look so different from all of my peers that I was like, who am I in this body? What is going on? Not only did I feel horrible about how I looked, but my peers noticed as well, especially the boys. They started to laugh at me, make fun of me. They would call me thunder thighs. They would call me hooters. And, I literally just couldn't find bras that would support me enough. So when I was in gym class and I was having to run, and I was athletic, like I was a tomboy. So I was trying to still be that little tomboy girl, but now I have these boobs that are like in the way. And it was just awful. It was an awful, awful time for me. And because I wanted to detract myself, distract from how awful and ashamed I felt about myself, I doubled down on my efforts to perform, perfect, and to please. And so I kept getting those straight A's. I started to get involved in more sports, more activities, more accolades. I socially was the one who had all the parties. And because my mom and dad didn't really pay attention to what was happening in the house, it's like, oh, Kim's house is the one where we can go and drink and not get in trouble. So I was caving to peer pressure and I was pleasing my peers even more. Anything to just avoid the shame that I felt about how I looked and just feeling unworthy and not enough. And that was how I started to perform, perfect, and please.
Mm. Yeah, and I can imagine how when you tell these stories, the people, like the listeners of your podcast, your clients of coaching programs and all that, how all then can relate to that and how they can resonate with those kind of stories.
Well, very much so, right? Now, maybe not every person has had that puberty story, but they can certainly relate to the feeling of being in that kind of pain, of not feeling okay, feeling like they don't matter, feeling not enough, not worthy, not lovable. I don't think there's a single freaking human on this planet that hasn't felt that in some way, shape, or form. And the one thing that I love about living in today's day and having the internet and connect the way that we do is because I'm in the United States, you're in Spain, and I've worked with people all over the world. And the one thing that I can say that I have experienced is that there is that universal suffering. Our cultures can be different, the foods we have, what we do can be different, but there's this universal suffering, that pain of I'm not enough, I'm not worthy. And everyone I come into contact has some similar story or definitely that feeling, that core wound of I'm not enough,
Mm.
I'm not worthy.
Yeah. And that's also why I believe your podcast has a big impact because it's like sharing that idea and helping people to deal with that kind of feelings and that kind of stories. So yeah, really powerful. So how do you think sharing your own story has impacted your business?
Well, number one, I will say that one of my favorite teachers slash guru, and I have like my dream team of people that have helped me on my journey along the way. But one that I really love and really resonate with is Brene Brown.
Mhm.
And the reason that I love Brene Brown is because she is so freaking vulnerable. She shares stories that she went through. And she takes off her masks. Like she has shared some very vulnerable things about being a mom and her own body image and her own weight and her own feelings around her husband, her marriage, being in recovery. And I feel more connected to her when she shares that type of vulnerability. There's such a relatability. So when we can take off our masks, and that's why I called my podcast What I Did, when we can take off that mask and we can be more vulnerable, we can connect more with others because, as Brene Brown says, and I'm quoting her, that vulnerability is the cornerstone of connection. So the more vulnerable I can be in sharing those stories, like sharing that story about puberty, it's getting easier for me to share it, but that was very painful and humiliating. And I probably wouldn't have been able to share that 5 years ago in the way that I can share it today. And the reason that I can is because I have worked so much on healing that wound that now when I share that story, I'm not reliving it, I'm retelling it. And yet it still gives that relatability to the listener or whoever's in front of me that, yeah, wow, oh, she gets it. I remember when I felt blah, 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 or I remember when I was 11 or 10 or 6 or whatever, and this happened to me.
Mm. Can you recall a specific moment when you realized how impactful it was to share your story?
I think it really did start when I first started doing Masks Off, because I started in 2020. I had a co-host at the time, and it was just called Masks Off. And then when I went on my own, it became Masks Off for People Pleasers and Perfectionists. But I remember in the very beginning, we would have people make comments and say, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being so real. Thank you for being so raw. Thank you for being vulnerable." So I knew that even though it was hard, because I was so afraid that the people that know me the most, like family or friends, would start to listen to my podcast and they would know who I really was. And I was so afraid in the beginning, but I just kept doing it and I kept healing myself and I kept reminding myself that the reason I'm doing this podcast is to help other people. I've done so much work on myself. I have so much experience, strength, hope, wisdom to share with others, that to keep it quiet and not share it is doing a disservice. So that's what would keep pushing me and catapulting me into share, share, share.
Mm. I really like that you bring that up, because when some people has this feeling that why they should or not share their story, I think one of the keys is focusing on the audience, focusing on the people that you really want to help, because that again will take out some of the concerns and the struggles that you are having, because you have really a purpose of doing that. It's not just because you feel like there is a reason why you are doing that, and it's based in helping other. And I believe that's really powerful as a motivation. So I really like how you bring that up.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, I can't say for certainty, but I do have a belief that a majority of people are afraid to show their true selves. Thus, they wear masks, whether it be on a podcast or whether it's just showing up as their true selves at their jobs or in front of their families. So, again, I was telling you about my book that's coming out later in October. And in my book, I write about how difficult it was for me to even be my true self with my family, with my husband, my 2 kids, my mom, my cousins, because I just always felt like there was this underlying fear. There's this undercurrent of fear that if I try to be my true self, that there is a risk of rejection, of abandonment, ridicule, disapproval, disappointment, because that is something that I experienced as a very, very young girl with my mom. I learned even before that teacher story and before the puberty, there were times when my mom would give me a look of when I would say something and say, the look would, and she would say at times too, like, how dare you say that? Or why would you do that? Why would you be that way? And as a young child, we have no choice really but to interpret that as, oh my goodness, something is inherently wrong with me because my mom must know, she's my caregiver, right? Or my dad or whoever our caregivers are, they must know. They're the adults in our lives. So if they're telling us we're wrong or what we're saying is wrong or whatever, bad, then we internalize that. We interpret like, yeah, there's something really seriously wrong with me. So it became very hard for me to take my mask off, even with my husband, my kids, my family, as I mentioned, to be my true self. So there's this fear of exposing ourselves. And again, that's what Brene Brown says about vulnerability too. The uh, definition I think she says of vulnerability is taking emotional risk of sharing. And if we don't feel it's safe, we're not going to. So therefore, going back to your question and what you were saying, there are many of us that have these really powerful stories that we could, or thoughts even, or knowledge or information that we choose not to share because we're afraid. We're afraid to step out of our comfort zone. We're afraid to shine our light. So we keep quiet, we play small, we stay in the background, and we let other people, be front and center.
Mm. Yeah. And connecting to that idea, I believe that personal brand and personal brand story, especially, is really connected to that fear of rejection, fear of exposing ourselves and be in risk of others judging us and all that. So, what could you say to someone that might be wondering who will care about their story and why it's important to share their stories?
Yeah. And I love the title of your podcast because it's perfect, right? It's like there, for someone who is even thinking that, like, who am I? Like, that's another way of phrasing it. Who am I to think I should share my story? Who's going to care about me? I'm just Kim from, a small city or whatever. And again, I would say that, at least for me, I know that that was rooted also in a childhood wound, one which I also shared with you because you helped me with my own story, Bran, and we can talk about that too if you want to, which is the Snow White story. And Snow White was a play that I wanted to get the lead role of playing Snow White. And it was around the same time that my teacher said to my mom, Kim is capable of doing more. It was that same year. And I tried out. And before that, first I'll back up and say, before I tried out for Snow White, I was used to singing, dancing in my kitchen, in my living room for my mom. And my mom thought it was like amazing. Like she would cheer for me. And I just thought I could rock it, right? Like I was going to be the next Beyonce, but I could not sing. I couldn't carry a tune. So when I went to try out for Snow White, I was like, all right, I'm going to be Snow White. Like I can be Snow White. That's how much I was still in my big self, right? I was putting myself out there, I was stepping out, shining my light. But when I tried out and my teacher literally said, you cannot sing. And so, you're not going to get Snow White, but you can go and help with the props and be back behind stage. It was one of those situations again that I was devastated, and I interpreted that situation as there was something wrong with me. Because often as kids, we don't have our caregivers helping us to work through those situations, those emotions, so we don't know how to really make sense of them, and to separate and say, okay, just because I didn't get the lead of Snow White does not mean that I'm then unworthy. It's like, okay, you just didn't get Snow White, or there's something. So that also creates then a core wound, so that as I move forward in my life, and this is the case to answer your question for other people who would have a similar Snow White story, that they feel like an imposter. Who am I to shine my light? Who am I to be my big and abundant self unabashedly and put myself out there? There's that fear that if we do, once again, there's the rejection, the humiliation. I'm not good enough. I'm a nobody. Why would anyone want to hear my story? And what I would say to that person who is questioning is that, number one, I say this all the time, we are all worthy and we all matter just because we're freaking born. We all have the same energy in us that's in the ocean, in the skies, the plants, the trees. Like that energy, that divine energy that makes up nature is us. And that's like a starting point for doing the inner work to have the courage to believe we're worthy and we're unique in every way. We're not like necessarily maybe special. We're similar in a lot of ways, but we have a unique story that's our own. And even though there might be commonalities or similarities, you might have a story similar to me, but you have your own unique perspective, your own unique experiences that makes that rich and worthwhile and meaningful to tell it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. This is beautifully put together. Um, since you mentioned your book, I would like to talk a bit about that. How has you incorporated your personal brand story into your book? And what has been the process? Because it's like kind of interesting going from fear of sharing and being true to yourself to someone who is an author and is like sharing all yourself in the sense of who you are.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, yes, this book is me taking off my mask in the biggest way. I mean, I just really take off my mask and I'm so vulnerable in the book, even more than I am on the podcast. So it has been a process for sure. I have been planting the seed in my journals for 10 years, 15 years. I have been saying, I need to write a book, or I should write a book. I need to write about this. And quite honestly, I just didn't have the courage to tell my story until recently. And I also believe that things happen for a reason and in divine timing. Like now I can take a look back at the journey to where I am right now, and I can see so clearly that, oh, yes, this had to happen first. Then that had to happen. And then this, and then this, and then this, like following the breadcrumbs. It's so clear to me now that all of that needed to happen. So I started planting the seed years ago, writing in my journal, but I had so much healing I still needed to do. I had to meet Dr. Shafali, who is a conscious parenting guru expert who helped me tremendously to heal a lot of my own baggage that then becomes a big part of my book, right? So I had to do the work. Then she even introduced me to the person who did the ghostwriting. So I had to meet her and I had to do the work before I met the ghostwriter. And I had to keep healing. And then I had to do the podcast first. So I'd have some practice in taking off my mask and putting myself out there. And then I had all these little stories, right? I'm getting more confident, more courageous to speak and share vulnerably, but they were just kind of, I wasn't really sure where I was going. I didn't have a direction, a clear path. And then I met you. And then I met you. And we did our work together, and you helped me with my story brand. And that's when it really clicked inside my mind. Oh, okay, here is a clear, organized path and way to use my stories. And that really helped to shape for me the way my book is outlined. And so that's how it all came together.
Amazing. And thank you for sharing about our work together. It was really I am really grateful for that work. And I'm so glad that that has been helpful for the process of the book as well.
100%. And it also, not only that, but because we really, the way you had, first of all, your questions were amazing that you had me answer in terms of me telling my story, and then how you structured it and gave me direction and gave me ways to use it, whether I'm teaching a class in person, or even if I'm like right now, I'm appearing as a guest on a podcast, which I'm doing a lot more guesting on podcasts. Now, when they asked me at the beginning, what is your story? Tell me your story. I now have it in my head from the work we did. I know my stories. Well, I know my story, but you know what I mean? I know which ones to pull out, and I know how to use them. And that's because of the work that we did together. Before, everything was just out there, disjointed all over the place. And you helped me to really just kind of bring it all in and organize it, have a structure. And this is like when to use what and where.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, glad that is helpful that way. And just a question about that process. What made you decide to actually go and work together and around your personal brand story? Because I know that you have different coaches and mentors. What was the theme that made you decide, yeah, I am going to work on my personal brand story. This is something that will help me.
Because everything I was doing was disjointed. I had the podcast, Masks Off for People Pleasers and Perfectionists. Then I have my business coaching, People Pleasers and Perfectionists, my 5-step power pathway, my prison to paradise, ways of teaching things. And and then I knew I wanted to write the book, and I couldn't in my mind figure out how they came together. I didn't know how to marry them. And even when I started working with a business coach in 2022, it was August of 2022, that's when I started to do the 5-step power pathway. That's when I started to work on the coaching. The podcast was already established, but I felt like they had, like, the podcast was over here and the business was over here. And I knew there was a way to marry them, but I didn't know how. And so when we started to go through all of my stories, and remember, there was that one day where it was this aha, like, oh my God, it makes total sense how the podcast, the Masks Off, matches with my story, which matches with what I teach. And so I didn't know at the time that I needed you. I didn't know that I needed you, but once I worked with you, it was like, of course, that makes total sense.
Mm. Yeah, this really yeah, really nice to hear that this work together was so powerful for the whole thing. Um, yeah, something else that I would like to ask you about the process of writing the book, because you have mentioned something before we start recording about what has been some unexpected challenges around the process of writing the book, and how that has making you reconsider your own process?
Well, first of all, I wish someone wrote a book on what to expect. You know how when they have the book, what to expect when you're expecting, if you're going to be a new mom. You can kind of read that and get a little idea of some things you can expect when you're pregnant or when you're having your first child. And if there was a book of what to expect when you're writing a book, that might have been helpful, because I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mm.
I didn't know how overwhelming the process would be. number one. Number two, I don't know why I thought after the first time he wrote it, the first draft, that it would be almost like done. Like, that would be the one I would fall in love with. So if I'm honest and I take off my mask, when I read the first draft, I felt so nauseous because I was like, oh my God, this isn't good. And secondly, I will say this. I gave him, the ghostwriter, 21 years worth of journals. My journals with my most intimate and private thoughts. And I let a complete stranger read them. That wasn't really that bad. That part was like kind of okay. But then when he put it into print and I knew the world was going to see all of it, I was like, oh my gosh. So, and the reason why I felt that way is because he was, not that he did it intentionally, but some of the characters or people that are in my life were villainized. Mm-hmm. And that's not the point of the book, to villainize someone else. And so we ended up landing on a process that ended up feeling really good for me, where we still told what really happened. I still share many times what my mom did or how things happen with my mom or my husband. But in the sense of now with this broader perspective, that it was there to grow me. It had to happen. Those experiences had to happen. So it was a different lens, still the same information, still from my journals, but from a different lens. And that was maybe the second draft. Well, I will say this. Once he wrote that, I then took the book and I went in and I rewrote and I reworked it into a way that felt okay for me. That I never expected to have to do. And that was such a challenging experience because I'm not really a writer. So to go in and figure out how to do that was challenging. And then I gave it back to him and then he was like, wow, you made amazing changes. This is really good. It's brilliant. And then he did another draft after that, just polishing it up, but it still wasn't where I wanted it to be. And so to have to keep going back to the ghostwriter, who is the professional and has been doing this for a number of years, and to speak up, assert myself and say, can you do it again, is the ultimate pain for a people pleaser. Like my people pleasing tendencies were screaming, like, no, don't do it. Just be quiet. Just be happy. It's good enough. Don't worry about it. Don't rock the boat. Just say it's okay. And the healed part of me, the true self, knows, like, no, this is probably my one and only book. And I have the right to speak up and to ask for what I want and for what I need. And I need to keep going back at it. And we're still doing that. Even now, I just had to do that this week. And he wasn't happy that I asked him to do it again. He thought he was done. And so this is the healing process. This is the action that needs to take place in order to show my inner child, my little girl, that I have her back. Because that was the whole problem with the people action, was that I abandoned myself. Not only did my caregivers in the beginning, but then I started to abandon my inner child over and over and over again, thus people pleasing, right? Every time I would people please, I'm abandoning myself. So now, come full circle, my tendency was to want to abandon myself again and take care of the writer's feelings. Like, oh, okay, I don't want you to be upset or disappointed. I want you to be happy with me. So let me just acquiesce. But I didn't. And so that's where, on a personal level, it was so challenging and so much growth. And I know the universe is putting this in my path because, as I said to you, the universe is saying, okay, Kim, so you think you're recovered, or you think you've got this people-pleasing perfectionism stuff down pat. let's see if you do. And so, and that's what I say to people when I'm teaching is it's not about the patterns going away once and for all, or any kind of patterns is the best word, or trauma that we've had in our lives. They will continue to pop up. And it just means that we have to do another layer or a deeper layer of healing. And so that's why, like this last time, it was like, yep, it came up, the pattern. I saw it. I was aware of what was happening. I went inward. I comforted my inner child and I said, it's okay. We got this. I've got you. Just, we're going to be okay. And I took action. So that's the growth of all that. 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have even spoke up. And then even like, let's say 6 months ago or a year ago, I would have had a lot of inner turmoil over it for maybe days or weeks or whatever. Whereas I was like, okay, it was much quicker this time and easier. So that's the beauty of it.
Mm. And I can see how this was not easy, but now even you can use it as a way to inspire others about this journey. And it's not something that you will finish and it's complete. You keep going on and you keep doing the work. And it's somehow leading by example. So now this is a new story that you can share with your audience about, yeah, you will find new ways of testing yourself and how you react to that with all the process that you have been going through is what will show the progress, right?
100%. And that's been the content of my podcast it's been 4 years, just came up on 4 years last month that I've been doing the podcast, is because these types of experiences and situations keep coming up. And it's just a way for me to then share that story with my audience. Like, hey, guess what? This just happened. And this is how the perfectionism showed up. And this is how people pleasing showed up. This is how I dealt with it. So it's a great way to teach others, is by sharing stories and examples. And that's why our stories matter.
Yeah. And also talking about examples is so it makes your content and your examples so different, because there could be someone else offering support to similar audience and all that. There are no one else with your life path, and your stories will be unique. So your samples will be unique, right?
100%.
So can you think about how at some point were you worried about sharing too much?
I think in the very beginning, I did when I first started the podcast, but it was more from the place of I didn't want to be ridiculed or judged, criticized, because it was so hard for me to take off my mask. I don't feel like anything that I shared was too, I don't know, personal or too inappropriate, or I still have that barometer, that filter that knows what's appropriate to share and what isn't, and how much to do. So I do think there is this kind of balance that we have to titrate when we're sharing. I remember learning in a 12-step room in I can't remember if it was an Al-Anon meeting or codependent meeting. It doesn't matter which it was, but there is a teaching or a warning about people in general that overshare, people that are dumping, that are just, it was almost like, I think the lesson was be wary of a person in your life that just overshares and shares everything and shares quickly. Like if you just meet someone and within weeks they're telling you their deepest, darkest secrets, be mindful of that. Like that is a little, there's no boundary, there's no filter. So there is that potential, there is that danger, negative, unhealthy side to sharing too much. But for me, I know it was never going to be a problem because I was on the other extreme where I would never share anything. So I probably could never personally go to the other extreme and overshare. So it is about also choosing examples and stories that are not only relatable, but relevant. Is it relevant to what I'm trying to teach? Right. So if I'm talking and teaching about taking off the mask and being your true self and healing and inner child work and people pleasing and perfectionism, naturally my stories are going to connect to that content. So I think that it is important to be intentional about what we're sharing.
Mm. Yeah, and something that made me think of is how you can share the same story, but in different levels of details. So, as you say, when you are meeting just someone, you are not sharing like the nitty-gritty details. So, the same with your content, you can have different levels of going into details, let's say, in a more external platform, and then maybe you have your emails where you go a bit more into details, and then maybe your program where you are helping people, and sharing certain details can help them to understand better the process, and can be the same story but you are sharing in different ways.
100%. And that's such a great point because when I do write my newsletter, I do go a little bit deeper. And even in the book, I go a little bit deeper with the stories and talk more about some more details or different details, more emotion that I feel. And then depending on, because with time and whoever's interviewing me or I'm interviewing, I might just share a synopsis of the story and a little bit of the story. So I agree with you.
Yeah. And this also something interesting, how depending on the audience, we are sharing the same story different. And that's as you mentioned about the book, having the different angle and have the different lens. Because you can share the same story, but focusing on one element or another. And that's why when we were working together, it's like pointing out who is going to be the audience and what is the main thing that you want to highlight. So choosing your stories based on who are you going to be talking to instead, because this story can be the same, but the emotion or the experience that you are choosing and how you are sharing that will be different.
100%. And we talked about that because one of my goals or desires is to go into schools and to talk to teenagers and college students. So not only will the lens be different when I'm speaking to them versus maybe another time I'm teaching and I'm talking to parents, but I may use different details or, when I'm talking to parents, I'm going to come from the lens of being a parent. But when I'm talking to students, I'm going to come from a place of when I was a teenager so that I can even relate more. And then if I'm talking and doing a program for teachers district wide, I can talk from the lens of when I was a teacher. And I could tell in all three of those situations, the same exact stories. I'm just going to tell them a little bit differently.
Yeah, 100%. So now a question that I like to ask to all my guests. What would you say is the part of your personal brand story that surprises people the most?
Um, you mean the part about me personally or?
Yeah, in general, from
Well,
stories.
yeah, I think I'll share because I know we talked about this when we worked together. So again, I'm masks off, take off your masks, be your true and authentic self. But yet I shared early on how much of a perfectionist I was and had to have this perfectionistic persona that I had my shit together all the time and had to look a certain way. My house had to look a certain way. I had to behave a certain way. And so what is surprising then for people often is my love for rap music and for boxing. It just doesn't really play into the persona. So I think that's the most surprising part about who I am, but it fits in beautifully with my brand, which is take off your mask and be your true self. And so when I'm like, okay, yeah, I listen to rap music. I listen to the most core rap and I love it.
Yeah, I remember when we were working together and we were covering this because, yeah, it's like a perfect example of how you just being true to yourself and sharing something that you enjoy, and even if it's unexpected to others. So, yeah, that's a beautiful example to share how you're true to yourself and you share who you are.
100%.
So, before wrapping up, I would like to ask you if you have something else that we haven't covered and you would like to share here in this space.
I just always like to share that, and I do share this, as a wrap up in most of my interviews, but I think it's so profound and it's worth saying every single time if I do. And the reason why this work is so important for me, the reason why this mission is so important for me, this masks off mission, if you will, is because, first of all, if I feel it's an epidemic, the people that are so afraid to be their true selves and are wearing masks, and as a result of wearing a mask and not being able to be their true selves, are feeling depressed, anxious, lonely. Loneliness is huge. Addiction, substance abuse, so on and so on and so on. That for me, it's important to get this message out so that people do not end up being on their deathbed and say and have this regret. And it is one of the number one regrets that people have, which is, I really wished that I could have been more myself. I wish that I had allowed others to know me, really know me. And I didn't share myself with others.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that beautiful message. And please share with us how can people learn more about you and the work that you do and how you can help them.
Well, thank you for asking. So the best place is to go to my website, which is kimgrosscoaching.com. And on my website, you can find the links for my podcast. And on the very front of my website, on the homepage, I have a quiz for whether or not you are a people pleaser or a perfectionist. So you can take the quiz. It's just 10 questions for one, 10 questions for the other. And it's simple, it's easy, but it gives you some immediate feedback on whether or not you have these tendencies to be a people pleaser and or a perfectionist. So that's super helpful. And then the only other thing, and I will have it on my website because this is going to be coming out right before this episode, before my book launches, there will be a page on my website for my book that will be coming out in October. Don't have the title for it yet, but it will be coming very soon.
And I will make sure that all the links and all this information will be in the show notes, so it will be easy to reach out. So thank you very much for this conversation, for sharing all your insights and your input. Really appreciate having you in the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was such a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
Thanks for tuning in to Who Cares About My Story, the podcast on how sharing your personal brand story can impact your business. If you found this episode valuable, consider subscribing or leaving a review. Your feedback means a lot. Did something resonate with you today? Please share your thoughts on the podcast platform or on your socials. I would love to hear from you and give you a shout out. Just tag me on Instagram at Reme Mancera. I can't wait for you to meet our next guest. Until then, remember, your story is relevant and worth telling.